Hello, Philippe.
Hello.
How are you today?
Hello, Vivian. Hello. Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you.
Yeah. We are grateful to connect with you virtually, and thanks again for spending your time with us. And of course, we would like to reserve all the spotlight to our speaker, and we would love to hear about their story. And today, we are so happy to have you in the show. Would you please share with us a bit about yourself and bring us all the way back how your great work started? Yeah.
Wow. I can do the long version or the short version, but you tell me, Vivian. I guess so. I'm Philippe Rosinski. I've been coaching for 30 years, and I've developed an approach. I would call it global coaching. It's an integrated form of coaching. It's looking at human development, team development, organizational development from multiple perspectives, from the physical all the way to the spiritual. We are looking at how to be in good shape so we can have stamina, as well as questions of meaning and purpose. And my approach is, again, a multidisciplinary approach that I've developed over the years. So I've been doing that for 30 years, but since I was a kid, I was always interested in learning from many different disciplines. So that has always been with me, and in a way today I have an opportunity to continue to learn from different disciplines. My background is initially in engineering. I studied in Belgium electrical and mechanical engineering, then went to Stanford University, got a master's in electrical engineering. But even at that time, I took all my elective courses in the humanities: philosophy, sociology, history, also a class in sports, kayaking in this case, but no, windsurfing was it. So I've been interested in a variety of topics. My first job was in the Silicon Valley as an engineer, and then went back to Belgium, worked as an engineer, as a manager. And something that struck me is that oftentimes the human potential is underutilized. And that's really unfortunate for people themselves, but also for organizations and for society. So I was wondering, how can we change that? How can we make a better use of people's potential in everybody's interest? And that led me in a developmental journey that took a few years, and eventually I started a new career as a trainer, as a consultant, and as a coach, but without knowing at the time that what I was doing was coaching. So I developed an approach that turned out to be coaching. I was one of the people who, in a way, started coaching. And so that was 30 years ago, in fact, a little bit over 30 years ago. And I worked for a couple of companies before starting my own company over 20 years ago, with an emphasis on bringing the intercultural perspective into coaching and a more global perspective into coaching. So,
thank you, Philip, for sharing a short version of that. I believe it's much longer because it's all the way 30 years. Curious questions. Is that a calling that you think is something that you did not know before as a engineer and working with the technical world and move all the way to human and human emotions? Do you think it's a calling for you, or some event happened or something like that? You please share with us.
Yes, I would say it is a calling. In fact, when I was in high school, I was always interested in all topics, and we had to choose between more of a scientific, mathematical. It was Latin mathematics or Latin Greek. And I hesitated a long time. In fact, I took a year Latin Greek that would lead you more to the humanities, and then switched to Latin mathematics. And with that, then you go to engineering school and the more scientific domain. But I was interested in both, really. But at the time, I guess I wasn't asking myself the question, what do I truly want to do? Because I was interested in various topics. As a good student, then you're supposed to do, the engineering, and that's what I did, and I enjoyed that to learn that. But then when I worked as an engineer, what happened is what I told you. I wasn't, although it's a fascinating field for me. there was a greater interest in human development, and so much so that I responded to that call. I mean, it was not an easy transition because essentially I had to start over in a way, but that's what I really wanted to do, and that's what I did, and I certainly don't regret the move that I did over 20 years ago.
Wow. Philip, allow me to bring you all the way back to when you were very, very young. And then when we were young, we always have an idea of, or a dream of one day, and we're gonna become somebody doing something. So back then, what was your first dream when you grow up? You're gonna become.
Well, I don't remember, to be honest. It's true what you say, that many people have this type of dreams. I don't recall having a specific dream like that. What I do recall was having just an interest in a variety of topics. So it's not that when I was a kid, I wanted to be this or that. I didn't really think in that way. I was more in the present. And eager to learn from multiple disciplines. So, and even later, then I didn't even realize that coaching existed. In fact, it didn't exist when I was a kid at the time. So that was a discipline that didn't even exist. So yes.
You are very untypical person in terms of learning engineer, though, because normally you really like to learn so many things, but you chose to go into your university time at engineer and then get a master in engineer also. So why did you choose to be engineer back then while you have so many other so many area of expertise that you can choose to learn, though?
Well, to be honest, I think there was this idea that in Belgium at the time, if you are an excellent student and you want to do the toughest studies, and engineering was the message that if you study engineering, then you can do anything after that. Whereas if you would choose, let's say, psychology or sociology at the time, you would be limiting yourself. That was the message. And also, it's really even shocking to me. There wasn't really a question at the time of what do you really want to do? What do you truly want to do? It was, I didn't even think in that way. It's really weird for me to say that, because as a coach, that would be the first question I would ask people. What is it that you truly want to do? What is really meaningful to you? But I wasn't asking myself those questions at the time. I did enjoy and still enjoy the mathematics. I think there is something elegant, fascinating about mathematics, about physics, about chemistry. So I think that is also intellectually challenging and stimulating. So it's not that I wasn't interested in that and I chose something I wasn't interested in, but and to be honest, I didn't even know what psychology was at the time. What human development was, I had no clue, because we didn't learn that in high school. I did learn about literature, for example, about history, and I was interested in that, but I didn't see myself doing a career in history or in literature. So then the choice was to study engineering. I think still these days, it is unfortunate in many high schools that people do learn, yes, it's great that they learn about mathematics, physics, and so on, but it's unfortunate that in many schools, I don't know how it is in Vietnam, young students don't learn about psychology and human development because it's so important. They don't learn about interculturalism. They don't learn about philosophy, although it depends. In Belgium, not so much. In France, for example, it's pretty big on philosophy. But that is unfortunate, because those subjects really matter if you want to live a happy life, and if you want to promote a better world, if you want to promote unity and diversity, if you want to promote constructive relationship among people, and so on. All that really matters, but kids don't learn that. I don't know how it is in Vietnam, but in Belgium they don't typically learn that. And in many countries I know they don't.
Same in
Same
India.
for us.
Same for
Yeah,
us.
they're not promoting these courses and mostly go into math, physics, chemistry. And if you do well in those, pretty much you have a bit of projection is going to be successful in the future. So we agree with you. Yeah, our daughter
Yes.
is the first person in our generations going to go into psychology major.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's already a positive side away from the parent. Both of us are doing good in science, but not doing a lot of courses during our university time for psychology.
And actually, yes, and actually my daughter is just completing her bachelor at University College London in psychology as well.
Oh.
But then she's going to study neuroscience, which she's already studying.
Wow.
But yes, so we are on the same. We have the same experience.
We are proud parents. We are. Yeah. So Philip, one question: when you change your career path, any challenge you had faced, and how you overcome those?
Yes, I mean, many challenges. I remember somebody saying, if you want to do some training, for example, why don't you do technical training? So your background, engineering background can help. And I said, but that's not what I want to do, And so the challenge was for me to just start over in a way. And but it was at the same time without knowing, where I'm going with this. And I remember attending a number of seminars, reading a number of books, and engaging in a journey. And but what happens is that this may be the phenomenon of synchronicity. When you are on that path and it is the right path, then you start meeting people, and new opportunities come your way. And that's what happened to me. And in a way, I remember at some point writing a CV with a letter of motivation to different firms in this area, and I received many positive responses. I think people, even though my background was a little bit different, but it seems that what I had written spoke to these companies I was looking at, and so yes, it was a challenging period, but at the same time an exciting one with new discoveries. It was also, I remember when I started, I would go to different companies trying to explain what I was doing and what I wanted to propose. Some people were looking at me, what is he talking about? They had no clue about what I was proposing, but fortunately, some companies did trust me, and I had a program where I would work with a number of people over a 1 year period, and I had several companies trusting, this young guy I was starting in the field, and several people came to this program, and this had a huge impact for the people who were there. And so there were publications in the media about this, and one thing led to another. But I did depend on some people early on trusting me and seeing the impact this had. And it's only a few years later I was invited at the conference as a coach, because that's what I had started in a way, and then met new people and new opportunities came.
Philip, allow me to bring you back 30 years ago, and a young Philip back then, going to a client and explain what you do and things like that, trying to promote your service. Assuming Vivian and I was a client, back then, what did you do to introduce your service? We really want to know how the newbie doing that back then.
Well, I don't remember exactly what I said at the time, to be honest, but I think the message was to say, one thing is training, and I'm also a trainer, so I think training is very important. But the message was to do something a little bit different, to start with your challenges. So I would go to you and would ask you about what are some of the challenges you face today. And so it was more not so much me trying to sell you something, but more listening about what are some of the challenges, what are your context, and then I would explain the approach. And the approach is to work over a 1 year period with you, where we would start with your challenge, helping you define that challenge, helping you set some objectives, developmental objectives, helping you define what success would be in a year from now for you. So that's the idea. What is success for you? What will that look like in a year from now? Helping you articulate that. And then the idea would be to work is you. I was trying to explain the coaching approach, but at the time I would also deliver some content. And it was content around how to build constructive relationship, learning from transactional analysis, for example, how to manage time effectively, how to manage meetings effectively, how to engage in project management, and so on and so forth, a variety of topics that were of practical importance, as well as an invitation to develop, to get to know you better. I would use other psychological models to help you raise your own awareness. So you become the vehicle of your own success, tapping into your strengths, into your resource, overcoming also some of the developmental challenges you may have that may prevent you from succeeding as well as you could. So that was the approach. It is still essentially the approach I have today, except that I have much more experience and I've developed many more things along the years, in particular how to integrate a cultural perspective into this. So how can you be aware of your cultural preferences? How can you open up opportunities for you by going beyond your current cultural limitations, not being stuck with one way of thinking, one way of communicating, one way of managing time, one way of organizing yourself, but just open the possibilities. This global coaching is about looking at yourself from a spiritual perspective. What is important to you? What is meaningful to you? From a political perspective, what sort of alliance, for example, can you build to help you achieve this success? From a physical perspective, how do you stay in shape? How can you maintain your stamina? How do you combat, some of the negative stress? Psychologically as well, how can you learn from different schools within psychology so you can, you can be flourishing really. So that's the idea back then, and that's what I'm doing today. Albeit today, I don't go so much to people to sell my services. I have the privilege of people more coming to me. They've seen me in one of the presentations, in one of the books that I've written, and then the organizations come to me and say, well, Philippe, this resonates with us, and would you be interested in doing some work with us?
Philippe, a lot of our audience also are newbie, so they come into the career profession with high energy, so that they would want to learn. And that's a term that you mentioned in here, and in the conversation earlier is trust. So some people trust you, but trust is something that earned. It's not something that given. So definitely there was something that you do there that get their buy-in, that get to their attention, and they trust the young Philip back then with the ambition, the things that you want to make the change in the organization, so that they gave you the business, right? So besides trust, was there anything that you did back then differently that made companies that decided, hey, I'm gonna invest my 1 year program with Philip, and hoping in a year later time, and then something will happen, some result will be coming as he's promised.
Yes. Well, one thing is to have some early successes. I think that is the main thing. Is once you have done something that has been really transformational for people, they become your best advocates. And I had some of these people who then share their testimonials, and that made a big difference. In fact, even many years ago, I remember one of the first people I coached back then, still 20, 30 years ago, I had a chance to meet again some of the people I coached back then, and that had made a big difference in their lives. So much so, one person that was not at the very beginning, but that was over 20 years ago. I mean, I can mention his name, Peter Leyland. He said many years later that he had learned from many people. He was a senior VP in a medical company, and he said many years later that he had learned from many people, but I was honored that he mentioned me as a person who would make the biggest difference in his life and in his career in terms of his own development. He had worked with different consultants. And that sort of testimonials is what gets the trust. But also at the end of the day, it's a human relationship. It's people must get at some point that I'm sincere, and also that I've done a lot of homework, that I don't, even though I was young at the time, I did spend a lot of time learning. And I think as a young person, sometimes people want to go maybe too quickly. I think it's good to also work with other people, which is what I did at the time. I worked with, I had colleagues who were more experienced than myself, and I would collaborate with them. And today I still collaborate with many different people. So we don't need to be on our own either. It's good to cooperate with other people, and we don't need to be alone to promote ourselves. It's not just about us individually, it's about us collectively as well.
Philip, I'm really interested on why you get into the love of coaching very early, because back then coaching is not even a career, not even a job, right? And then you got fascinated in coaching, and then you worked the career out of coaching. And I understand that you are the first European person got the MCC also, and
Yes.
why coaching resonate to you back then, that makes you invest.
Because I realized that if you just do train people, what happens is, let's say you do a leadership development training for a few days or for a week. It can be a very powerful training, but then people go back home, go back to their business, and there is a real risk to going back to business as usual. And so the impact can be limited. In fact, there is research showing that oftentimes that is unfortunately what happens. People may be very happy and give good grades at the end of good marks at the end of the program, but then what is the real impact that these leadership programs have? Sometimes not so great in terms of having a real transformational effect on people and on the business, on the company. And so what is needed, and I realized that back then, is to work with people over a period of time. Because, okay, you work with them initially, then they put in practice what you have discussed, what they have learned. But then it's good to go back to them and say, okay, what is your success? What worked for you? And we can celebrate the success. What is still an issue for you? And then we can discuss that. Okay, that didn't work out as you had planned. What prevented you from achieving this success here? What was in the way? What happened? We have an opportunity to discuss that and to overcome obstacles that are coming along the way. And that's what makes coaching impactful. That's one of the things that makes coaching impactful, is you're on a journey with people over a period of time. And so real change can happen. And so I realized that back then, and even though I didn't know the word coaching, and that's what I was telling you on that 1 year journey, people had to see a real change that they couldn't have seen in just a training program. So I'm always excited and passionate about having a real impact, making a real difference. So that's what motivated me at the time. And yes.
So why cultural coaching? So coaching,
Okay.
you love coaching, and then you very specific into cultural coaching. What happened to that?
Well, what happened is that I realized that as I discovered that there was a world of coaching. I went to that conference, that a lot of work had already been done, particularly in the US. And I became a member of the International Coach Federation. I went to conferences there, as you mentioned, it was the first MCC in Europe. But something was missing, it appeared to me. Coaching made in USA assumed a certain worldview that is not universal. Until recently, for example, the IC had a list of competence, and one of the competences is direct communication. I've been a professor in Japan now for over for over 10 years, in fact, for 14 years. If I'm only going to be direct in my communication, the coaching will stop very abruptly because I may offend somebody. And so this is just a simple example to say that if one of the core competence is direct communication, well, something is missing because communication can not only be just direct. In fact, ICF has changed that a couple of years ago, but this is just an example to say that what looks like a good idea, yes, you want to be direct because you want to make sure you are clear, but that's not a universal panacea. And this is just one example. There were other assumptions in coaching from the US that I think needed to be revisited. At least we need to be mindful of some of the cultural biases and assumptions that are associated with a form of coaching, so we are not limiting ourselves. Let me give an example. If I believe that life is what you make of it, Tony Robbins wrote a book, Unlimited Power, that we have unlimited power, that if I work hard, if I persevere, I can achieve anything, which is the American dream, the idea of the American dream. This is a great belief because it's likely that if I believe I can do it, I will put everything in place to achieve this success, and ultimately I may be indeed able to achieve success against all odds. The problem is that, I don't know about you, in my experience, we do not have all the power. There is something called luck, fate, however you want to name it. And if we don't see that, the problem is that we risk going beyond our limitations, pushing others beyond their limitations, and failing to accept our limitations can lead to all sorts of excesses, cheating, burnout for ourselves, but also putting too much pressure on other people, too much pressure on the planet. And so this is just one example of a cultural orientation, and the name for it would be control, which need to be put into perspective. There is another orientation, in this case called humility, which is about recognizing that the power is also outside of us. If we see that, the idea is, for me, the idea was to leverage the differences. It's not to be just under control or humility, but somehow combine the two. So in this case would mean, yes, I still act with determination as if I had all the power, but I recognize that I don't have all the power ultimately. So I also learn how to let go, how to accept my limitations. And if I coach, then I'm not going to put too much pressure on my coachee. Yes, I will, encourage my coachee, but I will also be mindful of limitations here, my own and the coach's limitations. I could go on and on and on, but that's the work I've done, is about being more aware of our cultural biases. So we are not falling prey to those, and we are not limiting ourselves. We can go beyond those limitations to have a more creative and more complete form of coaching. That was the idea that had not been done before. It's still, I see more and more interest in this, but there's still many coaches and many coaching schools who don't know this and who don't pay sufficient attention to that aspect.
I think a lot of relationship fails also because of cultural differences. That a boss and manager didn't know how to respect the team. With good intention, but then the misunderstanding of the culture differences make the welcomeness becoming not embracing, not building good relationship. And Philippe, I see the way that you grow in the coaching space is so fascinating. Starting with coaching, then you build expertise on cultural coaching, right? And then go to global coaching. Is, I think, it's where all the dots are connected. Because before we say that connecting the dots, but then without the dots, then that's nothing to connect. And when I hear your story, it looks like all the things that you read, all the things that you're interested in to learn, to grow, and then eventually just starting putting back onto the coaching and make it the concept of global coaching. So can you tell us more about that, would you?
Yes, but you have said it very eloquently. So it's indeed turning this interest that I have for multiple disciplines, turning that into an asset for coaching. I think we face complex challenges today in the world, in different parts of the world, in different organizations, and as well as planetary challenges. to address this complexity, it's not going to be enough to just do more of the same. We need to be able to approach situations from different perspectives, different angles. And so global coaching is about looking at 6 perspectives in particular to be able to address challenges in a more powerful way. And so the physical perspective, managerial perspective, psychological, cultural, political, and spiritual. Each of these perspectives can still be broken down into many sub-disciplines. For example, the message in psychology is that I see sometimes petty quarrels between different schools within psychology. My message is you can learn from all these different schools. For example, positive psychology, you can learn about building upon people's strengths, promote the conditions for flourishing. If you look at, for example, psychodynamics, you can better understand unconscious defense mechanism. So you are not destabilized when you see projections, when you see other defense mechanism, denial and things like that. And you are aware of these defense mechanisms, and you can be prepared to address that. You can learn from transactional analysis, NLP, cognitive psychology, cognitive neuroscience. And so you can, when you learn from all these disciplines, you are just better prepared to, better equipped to address a variety of situations. So that's just psychology. Culture is what we talked about earlier, and you just mentioned the second objective about just understanding cultural differences that can come across, so you can deal with that, you can understand that, and make the most of these differences, as well as become more creative. The political perspective is one that is often overlooked. It's not enough to be a good communicator. You need to understand what is going on in an organization. If you want to have an impact, for example, it's about building alliances with people. So you're not on your own. I discuss the fact that politics is inevitable, but it doesn't have to be negative and destructive. It can be a constructive venture if you try to promote your interest while at the same time being genuinely committed to serving others. The spiritual perspective is about learning from different religious traditions, mystical traditions, and philosophers from various schools of philosophy. It's about becoming more grateful. It's about resilience. How do you deal with hardship? It's about addressing existential challenges. It's about ethics. How do you navigate with ethical dilemmas? How do you deal with that? Meaning, purpose, being fully present, mindful. So there are a lot of areas that can be addressed. And so the idea here, I could go on and on, just the physical perspective is about the basics, you know, how can we be in shape, how can we maintain stamina, and so on. And we look at nutrition, we look at physical activity, different forms of physical activity, cardiovascular endurance. We look at also power training, flexibility, and so on. And so the idea is we cannot know it all, but we can be curious about all these areas so we are able to meet the client where he or she is. In some cases, when I would be coaching somebody, the question is, how can I build my trust, for example? Could be one area. But in some cases, the questions are more existential, and the idea is to be able to talk about that. In some cases, it could be somebody who's a senior leader and he's passed over for a promotion because he hasn't addressed the political aspects. How do you deal with that? And so the idea is to look at these different perspectives that provides an agenda for lifelong learning, because we cannot master it all. And one final thing I want to say, a long answer to your question, is it's also going beyond the mechanistic paradigm to embrace the holographic complexity organic paradigm, the realization that we are all connected, more so than we realize. And so I describe that in the third part of my book. But that would be a longer discussion to discuss that. So challenging the way we are looking at the world. So This is an agenda again for lifelong learning, but that allows us as coaches, when we are on that path, to be better equipped to address complexity.
Wow.
Philip, I have a curiosity. Thanks for sharing all the pillars there. From your 30 years experience of training and coaching, what have been improved and what's still lacking for us nowadays compared with the, like 30 years, 20 years ago? That cultural differences, is the gap wider or better?
Well, I remember I was in one of the first executive coaching summits, 99 and 2000. It was in the US. And we just had a few days ago a new executive coaching summit. And some of the people were there at the beginning, were there again. What happened 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, there was a question of how can coaching become a legitimate profession? Is this going to just be a fad, or is coaching there to stay? That was the question. I remember some professors from universities looking at coaching in a kind of in a smug way, not taking coaching very seriously. And these same people, I'm not going to mention their names, now calling themselves coaches many years later. So I think you see many universities now having coaching programs. You can have a master in coaching. You can even have a doctorate in coaching. You see more research in coaching. So clearly, coaching is there to stay and has become a discipline in its own right. And so that's different from what has happened at the time. In terms of intercultural coaching, I've had the privilege of training many people around the world. I have a 3-day program. I also have, since the COVID period, an online version. In fact, we are in the middle of it right now because it's over 6 half days. And I see many universities, I shouldn't say, but several universities having an interest in that. I've been invited to do, for example, an intervention at the University of Cambridge. I regularly go at Hanley Business School, HEC Paris, Cergy in France. Different universities have taken an interest in incorporating culture into coaching. I'm teaching a course at Kenichi Omei Graduate School of Business in Tokyo that is still quite unusual because that is part of the curriculum for managers and executives, that they need to take that course on coaching across cultures for managers. It is still an exception. Kenichi Omei is really a visionary, and he wanted me to do this course, which I started 14 years ago. I think so. We see a greater interest for incorporating also culture into coaching. And as I said, coaching itself has become a more legitimate profession. This being said, there is still a long way to go. I'm still appalled by the fact that in many companies, the leaders, managers are under a lot of pressure, and sometimes they are not able to make the most of human potential. There is still a lot of suffering in organizations. There is the great resignation, the great attrition, people leaving organizations because they don't feel included. They feel they cannot thrive in those organizations. So there is still a lot of work to be done. In fact, by the way, I just wrote an article which was recently published on diversity and inclusion 3.0. How can we go beyond the traditional approach to diversity and inclusion to have something more powerful and people can really then end up thriving in different organizations, making the most of diversity in the broader sense. So there's still a long way to go.
Wow. Philippe, you said that university are trying to incorporate the culture into coaching at university. So that's just one pillar. There's 6 of them, right? So there soon will be another 5 pillar that in your global coaching will be incorporated onto university program for coaching also, because that makes the whole coaching complex. But also as a person who really wants to become a coach like Vivian and I, it makes us feel scary because that's too, you know, the more that we look at it, the more we feel like we lack of information, we lack of knowledge, we lack of experience to becoming
Yeah.
you know, an effective coach for our coaches. So is there any advice from your end so that we can take baby
Well,
steps? Yeah.
yes. Well, coaching is a bit paradoxical because, in a way, it's very simple. You don't need to know all this stuff to get started. What matters most of all is having a genuine interest, which is what you have already in people, and being willing to connect to the other person with genuinely wanting to make a difference. And then it's a matter of essentially being present, listening, asking questions. So the basics of coaching you can learn very quickly. And it's good news on the one hand, because then you can get started very quickly. The danger with that is that some people stop there. They think, okay, I can be present, I can listen, and I don't need to learn much. So my invitation is to not be intimidated by all there is to learn to get started, but at the same time being committed to learn throughout your life, because we will never know it all. I mean, I'm still learning a lot, but that's exciting. So we don't want to be intimidated by that, but we can be excited about the prospect of continuing to learn. And the good news, we don't need to be doing this alone. We can partner with other people. That's a great way to learn. If you're coaching a team, for example, and you don't feel quite at ease to do that, you can do that together with a more experienced person. And then when you do that, you will learn from that person. And this is what I did at the beginning. I remember one of the first presentation I had to do, training. I was with somebody else, and I learned from that person. And now I'm often find myself being the person who brings other people along. But I still look for opportunities to learn. I've taken many courses over the past 2 years, so I continue to learn as well.
Wow. One of the things that Vivian and I are trying to do every time that we meet up with amazing people like you are is to ask how is your thinking process, and we ask and we share the why for this. Vivian and I believe that you know, our thinking, actually the quality of our thinking these days are not increasing, but actually declining. So if any advice that we can get, that we can share to people how amazing people are doing the thinking process, how do they save time for thinking, how do they keep themselves curious of learning and things like that, so that we can learn from the experts. So Philip, what is the secret for you to do all of the thinking?
Well, I think you just said it. It's taking the time. One of the reasons I really enjoyed, I didn't mention, I had the chance to work for the Center for Creative Leadership in the 90s, and I really enjoyed my time there. But I did realize that I wanted to write a book on coaching across cultures. I wanted to bring that into the picture. And for that, I just needed a lot of time. There was no way I was going to have that time while doing a lot of training, while managing, while being engaged in business development at the Center for Creative Leadership. So the only way for me to write a book was to just start my own company. Paradoxically, a for-profit company, but my goal is not to make the most profit. I want to have either a decent living, but I'm not there to try to maximize my profit. I'm excited about the work that I do. I want to make an impact, and I will sacrifice, projects that might bring me money just to make the time to continue to learn and to write. And that's what I did. I wrote my book. I put aside many months to just do that. And today I still am not looking to fill up my agenda with client meetings. I take time to continue to learn, to take courses, to read, to write, and it's just a question of priorities. But there are only, we only have 24 hours in a day, and I think it's important to also get sleep. So So at some point you need to decide what you want. I mean, and for me, learning, I really love to learn, and I try the best I can to make time aside for that. Yes.
Philip, you are ranking in Global Guru number 9 for 2022, right? And so coaching, you've been doing it for 30 years and you see the future, the bright future for coaching as a profession. And if somebody listen to this conversation and they say, okay, they got inspired and they would want to become a coach, is there any, if we can put everything onto one skill that they need to master, so that they can learn now, so that in the future it can be an effective tools for them to become an amazing coach. What would that skill be, Philip?
Curiosity is a word that comes to mind. I mean,
Curiosity.
curiosity. I don't know that I cannot that I can summarize that or capture that in one word, but it's about authenticity. It's about being ready to do work on yourself. As coaches, we are the vehicle. So we can talk, but our example matters the most. So we need to set an example, and that requires being ready to engage in our own development. So being curious to learn, being curious to learn, eager to connect. Connection would be another word. Connect, to establish a genuine human bond would be some of the words
Wow.
that come to mind. Yes.
We understand your past already, the amazing works that you've been doing now. Is there any exciting things that Philippe is doing and now heading to the future that you want to share with us a little bit?
You know, I have to say, in terms of the future, I also recognize that there is a lot we don't know. So we see what is going to happen. A lot of things that are happening happen through encounter. So I'm eager to seize new opportunities through encounters that I've made. Just to give you an example, I was asked to write a chapter on ethics, and I hadn't really reflected much on that topic. So I took a course on ethics to be able to write that, and that took some time. And I see an opportunity to do this more of this in the future. For example, the link between philosophical ethics, coaching, intercultural coaching, but if you had asked me 2 years ago if I was going to do that, no, the answer is no. So today, my energy is in building connections around the world. One of the things that I've done is also a masterclass with videos that people can take on global coaching, and it's really priced in a very reasonable way. I've done that with a partner who is in Singapore. So these videos. So I'm trying to reach out to more people in this way. For example, these videos through the different contacts, building new relationships, building new partnerships. So together we can make a difference. That's where my energy is. So my energy is still to also, I love sports, so I continue to do a lot of sports. I hope to stay in shape to be able to continue to do that. I continue to learn and read and continue in the area of global coaching, because by definition, it's all encompassing. We are looking at multiple perspectives. So I'm still on that journey to continue to learn from different areas and get the word out there by training people directly, indirectly, by forging new alliances, new partnerships, so to have a greater impact. I think this is very much needed in the world today, being able to use our multifaceted potential and to put that to constructive ends. We have many crises in the world today. I'm not even just talking about the wars, but at the ecological issue of climate change, destruction of ecosystems, inequalities, um, rampant sometimes consumerism, people just trying to consume at the risk of just endanger other living species on the planet. So I'm just trying to bring my modest contribution to how promote a better world. That's what I'm doing. I'm not sure if my answer is specific enough,
Very
but
beautiful. Very
but
beautiful, Philip.
that's my journey. That's my journey, and it will happen through and with others.
I'm amazed what you do, Philip, and I think that the more comprehensive that you can put onto global coaching, the more that you can get out for your coaches in terms of the depth of thinking, the depth of human beings that the person can be, and the more that they be in depth of and in connected to, like multifaces of life, then they can be of bigger leaders in all direction, not just making their employees better, but they will be able to see things a lot bigger and longer terms also. So that will be benefiting for everybody, and we admire
Yes.
you for doing that. Philip, we thank you so much for you joining the show and for sharing your expertise. Uh, I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope Vivian also enjoyed the conversation. So, as our audience, we wish you all the best and keep doing great things. If anything that we could be joining your force to support, let us know. And again, like earlier that you said, we say that if you ever come to our country, it's Vivian, it's me, and then we will be so happy to take you guys around town. All right.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your kindness, your positive energy, your curiosity, your openness, and thank you for inviting me on your show. It was a pleasure to speak with you. I look forward to staying in touch with you. And yes, I would love to come to Vietnam. I've been to many countries, but not yet to Vietnam. So that would be exciting.
Put that to the list.
Best wishes to everybody.
That wish to you, to your family too. Bye, Philip. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.